Retardé à cause du Covid, Les Mignons 2 sort enfin au cinéma et bat déjà des records de fréquentation outre-Atlantique. De passage à Annecy, le réalisateur Kyle Balda est revenu pour nous sur la création du film, l'influence des années 70 ou encore les enjeux techniques pré- et post-Covid.
I wasn't involved in the decision process, but I was very happy that the decision was made. Even though, you're excited to share everything you've been working on for years with an audience, we wanted to make sure that the audience could come back to the theater to see the movie, because this is how we designed the film to be viewed this way. It was a long time to wait, and it was definitely, for my part, hard because I was very anxious to show the film. So last night was fantastic for being able to finally share the movie with an audience. There's always more you could do. You can always ameliorate it. You can always continue to refine it, to add gags and things like this. We were very, very close to finishing when the pandemic had started, and we were feeling really good about where we were at. So we didn't decide to open the film up again and to start working on things. So we were already quite committed. Music, everything had come together at that point.
On passe à l'attaque!
A lot of that came from Eric Guillaume and Philippe Telequette. Some of it was just like based off a drawing. I think, if memory serves, Jean-Claude just came out as an idea of this villain with a lobster claw arm, and then the name came on top of that, and then the idea to have Jean-Claude Van Damme do the voice, and so that's one example. Nunchuck started with the name first because we thought that was a funny play with words. Then the design came where she's basically in a nun's habit, has the nunchucks. So finding these characters came about through different fashions. So it's not the same process for each one. Even like Svengeance, the roller skating villain, that came more from, roller skating was so huge in the 70s, and I grew up doing that as a kid, and just the idea of having a really like mean looking villain, but putting him on roller skates, and always trying to find what's ridiculous in these villains, because that's a big part of the whole Despicable Me universe. Anytime you're getting into like the technical stuff of trying to make believable elements, water, fire, and then the movement of hair, there's certainly a technicality, and the VFX department did an amazing job to kind of realize that. When we're developing the film and looking for the story, we can't think first about the technical things and how they might be obstacles or challenges. We must think about telling a good story, trying to find the entertainment, the fun in it, and then try to figure out how are we going to do this on a technical level. So that always follows the process. It's not something that would lead it. But aside from that, I think it's more the bigger challenge, I think, is trying to just crack the storytelling and the scene and the staging, more so than some of the individual elements that way. Fortunately, computer animation has made such a huge leaps over the years where these things, while they're still challenging, they don't pose the sort of big obstacles that they used to like 10 years ago, for example. When it comes to like the dragon or like a big character like that, the cinematography is more action driven. So, there's something that you're leading with the eye with, rather than like more static action shots where you're trying to compose something that's still. The action drives the cinematography. So I don't think that was as strong of a problem, the size difference with the characters in this type of sequence.
Ah, Kevin.
The thing that was really great was finding the limitations that the minions have to do Kung Fu, and then, finding the comedy in that. For example, when they have to do the kick and they have the smallest legs, so it's impossible for them to do that. Like leaning into what's the comedic aspect of what they can't do. And I think also just because the minions are so ridiculous that anything they try to do, of course, Kung Fu is not going to be any different for them. So that's where, we try to take those limitations and make them the advantages in terms of the humor, at least.
Demain sera le plus grand jour de ma vie. Le monde peut trembler. Voici venir Gros.
For Gru, it was, like thinking about who he is as an adult, and like eventually he goes to the, you know, to the good guy's side. But this was the seed of when he wants to be a villain, you know, and what makes him different from the other kids who want to be a fireman or something like, you know, more conventional that way. It's still very much Gru as we know him, but just like how he came that way. And then also, you know, what Steve Carell brings to the voicings and like, you know, his very intimate knowledge of who this character is. And even the fact that he was, you know, in the beginning we were like pitching the voice a little bit to try to make it a younger voice, but he even could modulate his own voice as we move forward so that we didn't have to do the technicality of that. You know, it was really just trying to distill, like find where he came from, you know, and how he became to be the guy that we know. Not a really different character at all, just like dealing more with the challenges that a kid would deal with being, you know, having adult aspirations and not being taken seriously. I'm a child of the 70s, so, you know, a lot of the references in the films were things that I related to very strongly, and a lot of nostalgia for me. With The Spy, like the kind of James Bond opening credits and things like that, that's stuff that I loved when I was a kid. There was, you know, so much material to draw from. And the 70s has so much style to it. It's such a distinctive era. But ultimately, the way we would decide which material to use was just driven by the story that we wanted to tell. If there was an element that lent itself to help, you know, develop that or augment that idea, then we'd use it. Like when he plays the record backwards to have the secret door to go down to the Vicious Six. Just things like that we were familiar with from the 70s, and then using them in a way that could serve story, essentially. Editorially, finding when to cut to one character or another and to try to find the balances of all the different storylines. Because as you can see in the film, you know, we start with everyone together and then it all spreads out into, you know, multiple storylines between Gru and Wild Knuckles and his mentorship, Otto's journey, and the minions learning Kung Fu, and then weaving that all back together. So you get a sense of it when you watch the reels as you start to put them together. Okay, we're missing Otto a bit here. What if we move that sequence a little bit earlier? Does that break anything? Is the tension still moving? And then you sort of just find it organically in that sense. It's an extremely collaborative effort making an animated film. And I think I find the best results come when any artist that you work with, whether you're directing the voice talent, a storyboard artist, or an animator, layout, anything, is to, you know, give really clear context as to what's happening at this point in the film, but not so much so that you're asking the artist to become a technician. You want them to bring something, you know, to plus the material. So for example, when we put a sequence into storyboarding, we want to follow the script, but we want to like go beyond and see like what can we bring out of it that's not on the page. Then after the storyboard artists do their work, what can the animators do to bring the performance to another level that's not even in the storyboard? So we're always looking for ways to plus things. And, you know, the reason we brought this team together was because they're so creative and talented. We want to, you know, be able to use that. But I think that helps best when you can give the artists a really clear context about, you know, where the guardrails are and like what's the container that this all has to work in. Ultimately, you sit back and you look at what's, you know, the performances that you've gotten from the voice actor or the animator, and you measure it up against the big scheme of things. The director has the vision of the whole story, so very zoomed out, whereas an animator is like really focused in on maybe 7 seconds of what's happening. So, you know, kind of keeping the microcosm and the macrocosm kind of balanced together.
Oui, Otto, c'est à quel sujet?
La couscous carbite! Pisayo, la maquina, Konami, Bandai, Kamedo, Seika!
Blah, blah, blah.
The most challenging thing is the comedy, taking these characters which now are, you know, beloved by lots of people, in finding new situations and new places to put them in and new ways for them to grow. I think above all, that's the real crux of the process. In the universe that we've created with the Despicable Me characters, it's important to homogenize it with what we've seen already because it's the same world. But stylistically in other stories, I think it's fantastic. Yeah.